OK, let's go to Sri Lanka now and the devastating economic crisis there. The country has a new Prime Minister and he's spoken to the BBC saying things are going to get worse before they get better. Our correspondent Rajini Vaidyanathan is in the capital, Colombo. Hi, Rajini.
Well, Lewis, I join you from Colombo's Gore-Face Green in the capital of Sri Lanka, which has become a place of resistance. If we just move the cameras over there, you can probably see, and I'm sure you can certainly hear, the demonstrators here. There's lots of tents in the background. People have been camping out here for a number of weeks. And their main goal, well, they're calling for Sri Lanka's President Gotabaya Rajapaksa to step down from office. Now, so far, he remains in power. But earlier this week, his brother, Mahinda Rajapaksa, stepped down as Prime Minister. And so on Thursday night, the country swore in a new PM. New of sorts, because Ranil Wickremesinghe has actually served as the Premier of Sri Lanka on 5 previous occasions. But perhaps this time, his 6th, is his toughest challenge yet, trying to steer this island nation out of a deepening economic crisis. And as you say, Lewis, he spoke to me in his first interview since taking the job, and he conceded that it's a tough job and that things could get worse for Sri Lankans before they improve. I met a mother of 6 yesterday called Priyanthi, queuing just to get 2 pieces of bread as a handout here in Colombo. And she asked me what difference you, as a new Prime Minister, could make to her life. What would you say to Priyanthi?
I believe that people should have 3 meals a day. When I've been Prime Minister on early occasions, I ensured that. And I will ensure that they will have 3 meals a day again. It's a challenge, but I am going to meet that challenge and overcome it.
What's the first thing you're going to do in your new job to make sure that happens?
First is to find out how bad the economy is. No one has got all the details. So I will be like a doctor who's opening up the patient for the first time. But I know there are issues. We've got to deal with the IMF. We've got to find money to get through this year. And I'm also speaking to friendly nations to come and assist us with bridging finance. But we've also got to create an atmosphere for foreign investment.
There are reports that Sri Lanka is running out of fuel and there are only days left. How much is left?
I will know by today evening how much is left. I don't think it's much.
So what can you say to all the people that we passed on the way here queuing up to get petrol?
I will have to have some scheme of rationing this time. So we've got to get assistance. We're talking with India and ensure that there's fuel available in Sri Lanka.
Is India the best hope at the moment in terms of getting that international help?
Yes, India has been helping us, but we'll talk to the others, to Japan, to South Korea.
You yourself said a month ago that resources are running out.
Yes.
This is your opportunity to be straight with the people of Sri Lanka. How much worse could it get?
It is going to get worse before it gets better. So I am looking for all the details that I could tell the people of Sri Lanka, this is the position and this is what we are planning to do in the coming months. I will somehow ensure there's sufficient food, fuel and medicine available.
And how? How will you do that?
We'll have to look for help from outside and talk to them.
If you don't get the help from India, Japan or other countries that you haven't mentioned, then you're saying that there could be a hunger crisis by the summer.
There won't be a hunger crisis. Somehow we'll find food.
Somehow, but how, if you don't get enough funds?
After I speak to them, there will be help coming from there. They won't allow people to starve.
The protesters at Go to Village, the other thing they keep saying is that they still want President Gotabaya Rajapaksa to quit.
Yeah.
Why did you agree to serve alongside him?
Prime Minister is elected by Parliament. And members of Parliament on both sides wanted me to be Prime Minister to tackle the economic situation.
So how are you going to change the course then? Because there are a number of policies that people agree were a failure of the Rajapaksa government.
I am going to change many other policies of the Rajapaksa government.
You say that you're going to look at the books, figure things out and...
I am not going to look at the books. I want to see how bad the situation is, how the real economy is functioning, how the what is left there in the central bank. I am not looking at the books. I know the books are cooked. I can't look at it at the moment. But what the economy is, I will. If you understand, one is the monetary side of it. But okay, we are now dealing with the IMF on the monetary side. But the real economy is not functioning.
What's the timeline for you to turn things round? What would you say to the people of Sri Lanka?
I will tell them, be patient, but gradually I will bring it back.
If we had to have a rough timeline, are you saying by the end
I'm
of
not
this
giving,
year?
I will tell you once I settle the thing and I speak to the other countries, I'll let you know.
And is there any other message you have for the world? You've just taken on a very challenging job. What would your message be to people watching this around the world as well?
We are getting back on our feet. We need your assistance for a year. Whatever we get from you, we'll repay, certainly. And help us to do it. We are the longest and the oldest democracy in Asia.
Well, that is the new Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, Ranil Wickremesinghe, but as we heard just then, he has a huge job on his hands. This island nation is running low on foreign exchange. That's the dollars that it needs to pay for essential imports of things like food and fuel. So just how challenging is Prime Minister Wickremesinghe's inbox? Well, my colleague Anbarasan Ethirajan has been taking a look.
The newly appointed Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe's first political challenge is here in this building, the Parliament. At the moment, he is the only MP from his political party. That means he needs the support of other political parties here to pass any legislation to bring the economy back on track. A busy market here in Colombo where people are trying to buy vegetables before the curfew ends. And Perina? என்ன எவ்வளவு விலை விக்குது காய்கறிலாம்?
காய்கறியெல்லாம் இப்போ முன்னே விட இப்போ 3-4 மடங்கு அதிகமாகிடுச்சு. முன்னையெல்லாம் 1 கிலோ வாங்கின இடத்துல இப்போ வெறும் 250 கிராம் தான் வாங்கக்கூடிய ஒரு சந்தர்ப்பம் வந்துருச்சு.
So Raju says that the prices of some vegetables have tripled in the last 1 year. As a result, people who usually buy about 1 kilogram of vegetables, now they are buying only 200 or 100 grams even. That shows how people are struggling to pay money for these vegetables. It's a common sight now in Sri Lanka to see long queues outside petrol stations because there is not enough supply, because the country cannot afford to import fuel. உங்க பேர் என்ன?
முகமது ஷாம்.
எவ்வளவு நேரமா நிக்கிறீங்க?
3 மணி மேல நிக்கிறேன்.
மேல நிக்கிறீங்க. இன்னைக்கு பொழப்பு போயிடுச்சு இன்னைக்கு.
இன்னைக்கு பொழப்பு இல்ல.
Now Mohammed Isham says he has been waiting in this queue for the past 3.5 hours and he's still not sure whether he is going to get the fuel. And this is one of the biggest challenges for the new Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. He needs to find enough dollars so that Sri Lanka can continue to import fuel. Sri Lanka's crippling financial crisis is caused by the lack of foreign exchange reserves, and the central bank here has warned that if the political instability continues, that could lead to rolling power cuts and food shortages. And this is one of the issues Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe needs to look into, because the country's usable foreign exchange reserves has now dropped to less than $50 million. That means they don't have enough money to import food and fuel in the coming months. So he needs to talk to the IMF to get the money, and in the interim period, he also needs to talk to countries like India, Japan or the West to find enough money to increase that foreign exchange reserves.
My colleague Anbarasan Ethirajan setting out some of the challenges that this country's new Prime Minister has. Well, to discuss that even further, I'm joined by Kalani Kumarasinghe from the Sri Lanka Daily Mirror newspaper. Thank you very much for joining us here on BBC World. Firstly, how much of a difference do you think the new Prime Minister could make?
Well, Rajan, it's yet to be seen in terms of how much support the new Prime Minister can garner within the Parliament. That is one of the major challenges he has ahead of him. But then, aside from that, he also has to assure the protesters that you have seen here that he is acting in their interest. That is the biggest challenge he will have going forward, I believe. And with the developments that have been happening over the week, which has been quite fast-paced, we have to see how he will sort of maneuver both of these situations.
You mentioned the developments earlier this week. I was here on Monday when there was violence here.
Yeah.
Pro-government supporters ransacked some of this protest site. We also saw clashes across the capital and across the country. Do you think the worst is over now there's a new Prime Minister in position?
Well, I do believe that those protesters who were attacked, They were the subject of a vicious organized attack. That's what I see. So I do believe that for the moment, with the curfews that are going on, you see people on the streets, but there is in fact a curfew in place. So with that, I don't really think that the protests will turn violent or there will be more attacks. But well, we have to wait and see. I really can't say at the moment.
It's hard to predict a lot in this economic crisis, but one thing that we heard from the Prime Minister when I spoke to him earlier was the fear that fuel could run out. He talked about perhaps rationing fuel. What could that mean for people? Could that spark unrest? And obviously there's already a lot of desperation.
Obviously, Rajni, because the fuel situation hasn't eased, the LP gas situation hasn't eased, everything is still pretty much the same or worse, even though there have been so many developments politically and otherwise. People on the ground are still suffering. So if there is a fuel shortage that is to come in, it will only mean that the problems are going to get worse and people are only going to suffer more. But as the new Prime Minister has promised, it's going to get better, but before that it will get worse. And that has been something that he has been predicting for quite some time now.
Ranil Wickremesinghe from the Daily Mirror newspaper. It's always very good to have you with us. So there you have it. And I say this so many times on air when I report from here, but this continues to be an economic crisis underpinned by so much uncertainty. Now, we have a new Prime Minister. That's some more stability, many will say. But the predictions for the coming weeks, more shortages, more desperation, well, that does mean that people are living through this crisis not knowing when they're going to be able to fill their tank with fuel, when they're going to be able to afford the rising, skyrocketing food prices that we're seeing here, and they're contending with daily power cuts. And as Carlini mentioned just then, there's still a curfew, although people are still out on the streets here at this protest site, so that's making life here even more difficult.
A desperate situation for so many people. Rajini, thanks so much for that live for us in Colombo.